Welcome to another coffee break with Kardec. The time for us to have some coffee, tea, or hot chocolate, as we wish. And meanwhile, we talk about some points in the book Genesis by Allan Kardec. A very interesting and scientific book. And today, I have picked up an aspect that is discussed by Kardec in chapter 10, which is organic genesis. Before that, Kardec talks about the genesis of the inorganic elements in the universe. And there's something which is very interesting in these books. If we read Kardec and then we read about the recent theories in astrobiology about the formation of matter in the universe, the formation of our solar system, the formation of our planet, the first light element in the universe, hydrogen, helium, and then how that developed in the stars until we got to carbon. And then it carried on developing in new stages of this process of formation and explosion of stars and so on, until we got to planet Earth, which wasn't completely formed, and then slowly it went into this process. Kardec talks about all that. The interesting thing is that, well, sciences, they have advanced from mid-19th century until now. And what we see is that now we give slightly different names. We have more details about that, but the main structure remains exactly the same. And this is the beauty. And Kardec thought it was so important to have a book among the 5 main books of the Spiritist teachings, to have this book talking about organic material, inorganic elements, bring our sciences all together in one book, because Kardec wanted to show us that everything that exists is under the same laws. But what we understand from these laws are very small, very tiny. Of course, the effect of these laws in the material life are more visible, are more easily perceived by us through our senses and our instruments than the one which is more general and also encompasses the spiritual world. But what we have here, as I've mentioned so many times, is just a fraction of the manifestations of these very same laws. And with mediumship, we then start to probe the spiritual universe as such. And Kardec has made this comparison, and I've mentioned that before as well, that mediumship is to the spiritual world as the telescope is to astronomy. So he gave us a broader view into that world. Well, and then Kardec talks about the formation of our planet Earth. In the beginning, the elements weren't all there, and then the Earth went through a process. There was no life. It was just a hot ball due to the processes. The planet was formed in a disk, what we called planetary disk, and as well as the sun. And with time, matter started to get together, a process of binding together and creating larger and larger bodies. And through collisions, through a process called accretion, where you add matter slowly in small fragments, and that matter gets there, and then these bodies, they increase inside, and then we have collisions, we have bits and pieces left into space that are going to form some other parts, and it's a very interesting process. And I'll try to go through that very briefly because we don't have much time. We run out of coffee or tea or hot chocolate very soon. But in general terms, what Kardec shows us is the process of first forming inorganic matter on the planet, and then at a certain point, we had organic matter. And also what we see nowadays in astrobiology is that we have some clues, we have some ideas, we have some theories about the moment and how a life appeared on Earth. So we still have some definitions which vary slightly from scientific groups, from one scientific group to another. but in principle, life is a process that evolves. It replicates itself. So organic beings, they are capable of replicating themselves, and through this process they may suffer slight changes. Otherwise we'll be just a copy of our ancestors, and then if the ancestor had a problem, we will inherit that problem, and perhaps we wouldn't survive for so long as we have survived. So the beauty is that through this process of evolution, matter is adapting itself. It leaves room for slight changes each time it replicates itself. So we're not exact copy of our ancestor. We may be a copy very close, but with some tiny variations, which very much depends on the environment, which is also constantly changing. And through that, we see the development of organic structures. Sorry, inorganic structures. But then we had organic structures as well, which basically these organic elements are the ones that form life. So this process is common. We see this through the history of our planet. When study archaeology, for instance, we can see that, and geology, we can also observe that. But then Kardec moves to the organic formation, and also he highlights that carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen are the four main elements that are present in organic life or organic beings, which is basically a synonym to life. But the difference is we may find carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen in inorganic matter as well. But Kardec mentions that, and we know from our books in the area as well, in the field, that the proportion of these elements, they are different in organic beings when compared to inorganic beings. But then it shows an evolution. We come from very simple atoms first, and then we see the formation of very heavy atoms, the ones that are there at the bottom of our periodic table, the ones that are very, very chubby, very full of particles, electrons, and so on. Basically, if we look at our periodic tables, we'll see that we have about 118 elements, different elements, starting from hydrogen and helium, which are the lightest, and the second lightest, hydrogen and helium, in the formation. They were the first ones to be formed, and then all the others came with time, a long time, billions of years, and until we got to the point that we are. The beauty is that there is an evolution, which we can see from inorganic to organic, and then the organic structures, the first organic beings, they started to evolve into more complex beings, and then we have the organs and so on. But what Kardec calls our attention is that, let's take an inorganic, well-known inorganic substance, salt, the table salt, which is composed by sodium and chloride. If we dissolve salt in water, it dissolves, it's there, dissolved, it's no longer the salt in crystal form. And then if we let that mixture, salty water, to dry, all the water will evaporate, and then crystals will appear again. So we had crystals, dissolved the crystals, no longer crystals, but the salt dissolved in water, and then we can recover the salt just drawing it out again. We have new crystals. But then Kardec says, with organic beings, we cannot do that. We have organic beings, when they die, we have a decomposition of organic beings. Even if we are capable of bringing all the molecules together, we won't have a living being again. And then Kardec gets to the point that he wanted to get, This was a prelude, an introduction to the vital principle. There is something more than just organic matter in living beings. They have what Kardec calls vital principle. The vital principle was there when the organic being was firstly formed. When it dies and decomposes, we can't get that back. Although we may keep all that matter together, we can get that matter, that association to live again. This is a process. We even have the process of Lazarus that was considered dead, and then Jesus, according to some religions, resurrected them. That means he was dead and he took his body again and came back to life. But in fact, he wasn't dead. He was in the catatonic state where he no longer can use his body, but he's still attached to the body. We can talk about that on another occasion, because it's also part of Genesis, the miracles. When Kardec explains the miracles, he also explains this situation experienced with the apparent death of Lazarus. And then we see that, dying and taking over the body, the same body again, and coming back to life is not possible. So Kardec shows that there is a vital principle, and this vital principle is the one responsible for something else than just the aggregation of organic matter. And what he says is that this vital principle is something that exists on us. So basically our organs, our body, the way it is structured, it's capable of keeping this vital principle in action. So by being alive, we can keep on alive by making this vital principle circulate. It circulates. It's just like a battery. When we have, let's imagine the battery of a mobile phone. When we have the battery of a mobile phone, if the battery is okay, it's capable of charging and recharging and keeping the mobile phone alive. So the cell phone is alive because the battery charges, and when it's running out of electricity, it recharges. So it produces and stores electricity. This is our organs. And the fact that we are using them, we are constantly charging and using the energy that this battery charges. With time, this battery loses its capacity of doing this. It stores less, and then it's capable to release less electricity for us to use, up to a point where it no longer can store electricity. So it is of no use. It dies. The mobile phone dies. It's the same with us. When our organs, they lose the capacity of moving this vital principle, giving us life, we have a natural death. But also by damage. If we damage the battery loses, although it's brand new, it may lose its capacity of storing electricity. This is basically what happens when we damage our organs by an accident, by a disease also may damage our organs, and then we lose this capacity. And if we lose it, so our form is still there, but no longer functional, no longer capable of moving this vital principle and giving us life. So this, in general terms, are the basic ideas. It's interesting. I recommend you chapter 10 about Genesis, when Kardec talks about, it's a review of inorganic, organic chemistry. And he points out that it's very important because we are looking at the same laws in action in different circumstances, in inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, and then in the case of a vital principle. We will come back to the vital principle sometime in the future in another coffee break with Kardec. And when we talk about fluids, for instance, we can always talk about the vital principle again. Okay, I hope you enjoyed your time, your coffee, tea, or hot chocolate. And if you have doubts, if you have questions, you can always leave them under the video, and we'll check that and answer whenever possible. So see you in our next coffee break with Kardec. Bye-bye.